The Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. Have you ever had a moment of success that you have waited for and longed for and dreamed of, and you've waited for quite a time, and finally it comes to that point of fruition and you have your moment of success? I had a moment like that in this place 5 years ago. In fact, just 2 weeks short of 5 years ago. I walked into room N, which is that little room in the Guthrie at the front, with 3 people, 2 of whom I knew, and 1 of whom at the time I didn't know. And for an hour, I defended my PhD. And I walked out of that room having successfully defended it on the biggest high I had had in a very, very long time. I was so happy that for 2 nights I really didn't sleep that well at all. I have no idea how I taught my pastoral leaders the next day. They were very kind and they didn't comment on my general incoherence. And it was just a moment of overwhelm, the favour of God that was upon me, and also the favour of the examiners. And I wonder if you've had a moment like that. For me, it underlined that I love success. I love the favour of God. And I love the favour of other people. Confession time. There's about 10 people in this room, possibly, whose favour I would really like today. I know you're all thinking it's the front row. I'm not too worried about the front row, quite honestly. The ones I'm worried about are my preaching class, who will have pieces of paper in here today in order to record their feedback on this preach so we can discuss it next Monday. I would like the favour of the people. And you know, I think we're probably all similar. We love success. We want the favour of God. We want the favour of others. Maybe you too see this in your life. There is perhaps an area in your life right now where you are longing to see success, where you want to see the favour of God come through for you. And maybe that's in your finances. Right now, maybe you don't dare look at your bank account because it's not a happy place. Or maybe it's family relationships. Maybe you're longing for the favour of God to come on these family relationships. You're longing for the favour of those family members to be turned towards you because relationships are not good. Or maybe the fact that we're in week 3 of term is making you think, okay, I need the favour of God on my studies. And I certainly need the favour of my lecturers on my coming assignment. Maybe it's your workplace. You need the blessing of God on your workplace situation right now. Maybe also you're hoping for the favour of others in your workplace, that they would see you, that they would recognise you, that they would celebrate you, that they would promote you. You know, whatever that place of success is that you need, and it might be something totally different. It might be an addiction that you need success in. It might be some kind of historic trauma that until this point has defined you, and yet you need the blessing of God. Whatever it is, friends, I think that we are wired to want success. We are wired to want the favour of God. We are wired to want the favour of people. It's not a bad thing. Unfortunately for us, today's text speaks exactly about this. The favour of God that is upon Joseph, a slave in Egypt, far from home. At the beginning of the passage, verse 2, the text says, the Lord was with Joseph, and he became successful. Verse 3, in fact, in the house of Joseph's Egyptian master Potiphar, the Lord caused everything that Joseph did to succeed. Can you imagine that? Everything you turn your hand to, succeeding. And as a result, verse 4, the favour of Joseph's master Potiphar follows. Potiphar puts Joseph in charge of everything. So we see God with Joseph to bring him success. And this favor is a visible kind of success. It's the kind of success that other people want to get in on. And so Potiphar gets in on the act. He wants to bless what God is blessing. And so he gives responsibility to Joseph. Now that is a wise move by Potiphar. He may not have realized it, but he will have realized it afterwards. But from that very time, verse 5 tells us, the Lord then blessed Joseph, blessed Potiphar because of Joseph, for Joseph's sake. God's favor is upon Joseph, yes, but God's favor is also through Joseph to Potiphar. In fact, the blessing of God to Potiphar is so rich that verse 6, he doesn't have to worry about a single thing. The blessing of the Lord makes rich. Joseph is carrying so much favor of God. Potiphar is receiving so much favor of God through Joseph that they are literally wading in blessing. It cannot be contained. And about 20 verses later, we get exactly the same pattern. Verses 21 to 23, the Lord, verse 21, was with Joseph. To such a degree, verse 23, that everything he did succeeded. Once again, in this part of the story, the favor of God elicits the favor of people. This time not Potiphar, but the prison keeper. It's the prison warden who wants to get in on the blessing stream this time. So, verse 22, the prison warden puts Joseph in charge of everything he has, not unlike Potiphar. And guess what? The prison keeper can relax entirely. He, verse 23 tells us, needs to pay no attention whatsoever to anything that is in Joseph's charge. It's the same pattern twice over. God is with Joseph and he favors him, giving him success. Other people see it. They want to get in on the act. They start blessing what God is blessing. And so they bless Joseph with delegated authority. And the result is crazy level blessing. It overflows Joseph's life. Now it begins to overflow Potiphar's and the prison warden's lives. And this blessing explosion applies, the narrator tells us, as much in the prison, the end of the story, as it does in Potiphar's palace. Now, it is not that Joseph didn't suffer in prison. Chapter 40, the next chapter, is clear that Joseph suffers in prison. Psalm 105, verse 18, also makes clear that Joseph suffers during this time. But the narrator wants us to know that suffering and the favor of God can go together. Even in Joseph's prison, God is pouring out blessing that he cannot contain. And maybe you're here today and you need to hear this. Maybe you find yourself in a prison so dark you despair of finding your way out. And it might be a prison of your circumstances. It might be a prison of your own making. It might be a prison that someone else has confined you in. But perhaps today you need to know that what you have considered your prison can be the place of his presence. Not just the palace, but also the prison is the place of his presence. It's easy, isn't it, in Potiphar's palace to find the blessing. But in the prison, too, is the place of his presence. And I could stop there, and we would have a really nice, feel-good sermon for the start of the academic year. In the prison or in the palace is the place of his presence. His blessing will be upon you and through you to those whom you serve. I mean, what a start of the year sermon, right? But of course, if I do that, I miss the entire point of the passage. Yes, the narrator does want us to know that prison or palace can be the place of his presence, but by setting that truth at both ends of the passage, the narrator wants us to read the middle. And 2 years to the week that I last preached physically in this room, I find myself talking about sandwiches again. Most of you won't have been there because you'll only have appeared in college in the last couple of years. But last time I was talking about Marken sandwiches. Now, the advantage of Marken sandwiches is they are actually a thing. Not entirely sure if Genesis sandwiches are a thing. But this is one. Very clearly, the repetition at the beginning and the end of the text, this is a sandwich. We've got, if you like, at the beginning and the end, this material about favour, about success. This is like the bread of the sandwich. Now, I don't know about you and sandwiches, but as far as I'm concerned, a sandwich that has no bread is a disaster waiting to happen. You need the bread to hold the thing together. It's an integral part of the sandwich. But, on the other hand, I'll never say to you, what bread did you have for your sandwich today? I will say what was in your sandwich. The filling matters. So what is our narrator's filling? What is paired with the bread that is the Lord's favour upon Joseph? Well, of course, it is the story of Potiphar's wife and her determination to bed our handsome hero Joseph. She's wily about it. She actually asks quite nicely, first of all, although actually the word in verse 7 used there is not a word used for sex in the context of marriage. She's fairly graphic about what she wants. And Joseph says no. And I think Potiphar's wife is not really that perturbed. It's kind of to be expected, isn't it? The slave has to say no at least once. But she's confident in her charms. She's confident in her feminine wiles. She's confident she will say the right thing. She will attract him eventually. And so she just thinks, I'll try again another day. And so she tries again. And again. The text tells us day after day. And day after day, Joseph says no. So verse 12, Potiphar's wife ups it a gear. She literally grabs at him. Now you need to understand that this is not typically how the Hebrew Bible presents women who want to lead men into sexual sin. Typically they use their feminine wiles. It's men who use physical strength in the Hebrew Bible to lead women into sexual sin. So I think the narrator intends this to be shocking. This woman is determined now to have Joseph at whatever cost. Whether that's now because of passion or because of punctured pride, who knows? And still, Joseph says no. And this time, verse 12, he removes himself physically from the situation. And so Potiphar's wife makes her final move, which is to gather the servants so that they will believe the lie, or at least corroborate the lie she's about to tell her husband about what Joseph attempted. That is the sandwich filling. The most flavoursome part of that sandwich filling, I think, is in verses 8 and 9. Why don't you have a look in the text? In verses 8 and 9, Joseph says no, and he explains why. And basically, it comes down to a holy fear of God. He says this would be wickedness and it would be sin against God, verse 9. To sin against your husband in this way, that would be sin against God. To sin against him by sleeping with you, to sin against him by breaking the relational commitment that he and I have, that would be sin against God. If I break covenant loyalty with your husband, I break covenant loyalty with my God. And so the reason Joseph refuses is his holy fear of God, his love for the Lord, his desire to honor the God of his father, of his grandfather, of his great-grandfather. This is why Joseph says no, because of holy fear of God. He will not dishonor God by dishonoring this woman's husband. And I think the narrator wants us to see that the bread and the filling of the passage go together. The holy fear of God is the key to the holy favour of God. The holy fear of God is the key to the holy favour of God. To experience success, to experience the blessing of God in the palace or in the prison presupposes that we are living lives of holy fear. Holy fear is the precondition for holy favour. The Lord's holy favour can rest on Joseph in both Potiphar's palace and in the prison. His holy favour can flow through Joseph to Potiphar and to the prison warden. Why? Because he walks in holy fear. Joseph fears God, and so he keeps his covenant. And as a result, God's holy favour is on Joseph to such a degree that it cannot be contained. Holy fear first, then holy favour. First holy fear, and then holy favour. So where does that leave us? Well, we've seen that the Lord was with Joseph, that the palace, the prison can be the place of his presence. So friends, whether you feel God's presence today or not, whether life feels good or not, God is with you. God is with you in that situation you thought of earlier, whether it's your workplace, whether it's your studies, whether it's your finances, your relationships, family, friends, whatever it is, God is with you. Let that settle. In Jesus, God is with us. Emmanuel. He will never fail you. He will never forsake us. But if we want to see his holy favour released, we have got to be living in holy fear. And holy fear looks like our relationship with God shaping all of our other relationships. It means that I cannot willingly choose sin against my neighbour. I cannot willingly choose sin against the poor. I cannot willingly choose sin against creation. Why? Because these are sins against God. Because to sin against people, to sin against creation compromises my relational commitment with God. And without holy fear, I won't see holy favour. It means we can't willingly choose to sin against fellow students. It means we can't take that book out of the library after hours when there's no one to hear the buzzer go off. Because that's stealing. It means we can't hide the book in a different section so no one else can get it tomorrow before we get to it. Because it's sin against, yes, your neighbour, yes, God. It means we can't willingly choose gossip. Oh, how easy it is to choose gossip. It means we can't willingly speak dishonour of others, and oh, how easy that is to do. Like the words have just flowed out of our mouth before we had a chance to grab them back. But it's sin. It's sin against the ones of whom we speak badly, and it's sin against God. I don't get to manipulate circumstances to suit me. In workplaces, we don't get to borrow resources. We don't get to just borrow a stamp or stationery or even time. We don't get to borrow time either from our employer because it's sin. If you're freelance, you don't get to fudge your self-assessment form. And the thing is, these things seem innocuous, don't they? How's the tax man ever going to know or care? How's work ever going to know or care about that stamp or that bit of paper or whatever it was? It seems innocuous. It seems like it's hurting no one, but the point is it's still sin against God. And without holy fear, I won't see holy favour. And then sexual misconduct. Obvious application. I can't not go there, can I? Friends, it matters because sexual sin is sin against another person or people, and it's also a sin against God. And I don't know what happens behind closed doors in this community, but I tell you that there will be more happening than there should be in a Christian community. And it's sin, and you know it, and I know it. And it has to stop. Because without holy fear, we won't see holy favour. So, friends, if you are stuck in an addictive pattern to sin, because that happens, doesn't it? Where you're trapped in sin and you can't get out, please, I implore you, take hold of the resources that are in this place to help you. Talk to the pastoral team. Talk to your tutor, talk to your church leader or your placement supervisor or your peer accountability group. Or if you need to take it outside of LST, talk to one of the prayer ministry teams that we know outside of the place. Talk to a therapist, whoever you have to talk to deal with this stuff, deal with it, please. Because, you know, we have more here right now at LST in terms of support than I've known in the whole 14 years I've been here. This is an optimal time for us to confess our sin and then start doing the hard work of truly repenting, which means turning away from it. Hear me say this, even as you hear the weight of the message about the holy fear, remember also that there is help. We're a body. We have to help each other. But in the midst of that, don't forget, without holy fear, I won't see holy favour. So as I close, you're probably asking, Chloe, why does this matter so much? Chloe, why are you fixated on holy fear? Well, I'm fixated on holy fear because I think the narrator is. But also because I've begun to imagine what kind of community, what kind of institution LST could be if we really got hold of this stuff, if we gave ourselves to holy fear and thus came to know the holy favour of God. Imagine with me for a moment, just first of all, individually, imagine the favour that God could release on your relationships, on your finances, on your family life, on your studies. Imagine the favour and provision that he could release on your ministry efforts. Can you imagine your children thriving, sick people being healed because you lay hands on them? People's great need for provision being met because you prayed for them. Can you imagine what the holy favour of God on your life would be like? And then corporately, what kind of place would LST be under the unrelenting favour of God? Can you imagine a community where nobody felt misunderstood, nobody felt left out, everybody felt like they had a place, everybody knew why they were here and what it was they were being called to do in this place? Can you imagine if no one were mistreated ever in this community? Can you imagine an institution that was so blessed with finance that we were having to give it away because we just didn't know what to do with it all? Can you imagine that kind of holy favour? Can you imagine a community where faith is rising, where worship is overflowing, where the anointing is as heavy in the classroom as in the chapel, as in the dining room? Can you imagine this kind of community? Because I'm beginning to dream now. I'm beginning to think of what this place could be, that believers might come here in their droves because they heard that God was amongst us, that healings and salvations would spill out into Northwood because the people just knew there was something in this place. Can you imagine what the holy favour of God would be like here at LST? Imagine for a moment the holy favour of God like you've never imagined it before. And then remember Joseph, because whatever you've just imagined, whatever we have just imagined, we will not see without holy fear. First holy fear, then holy favour. First holy fear, then holy favour. First holy fear, and then holy favour beyond anything we have ever imagined. May it be so.